welcome to Rates and Barrels. It is Friday, December 3rd. Derek and Ripert, Saris, and look who it is. It's Britt Giroli back with us after some much-deserved time off. Britt, thank you for taking time off because temporarily baseball pretended like it wasn't going to have a lockout, and then a bunch of really cool things happened. So we had a lot to talk about all week long. So I'm going to give you full credit for that flurry of activity that no one expected to see prior to the expiration of the CBA.
Yeah, naturally, I spent 4 days in Carlsbad at the GM meetings and really had my finger on the pulse because I kept telling people, God, it's going to be a really slow month until they figure out the CBA.
And now it's a long December.
The conspiracy theorist in me is like, did they just do that so they could say that, we just spent $1.7 billion on players? What are they complaining about?
No, I heard from a lot of agents that teams were nervous too about what was going to be coming. And I think they just felt better having
something locked in.
Yeah.
Addressing needs with rules they knew as opposed to having to address them later with rules that might be different.
Well, that's the thing. If the rules change, I think that's what you did see is the teams that weren't that close to the Lux tax, they were the ones that spent the most, right? The teams that were really close to the Lux tax were in the Lux tax. The only one that spent was the Mets, right? And they were just kind of like, whatever the rules are, we're going for it. But the big ones, like the Dodgers, Yankees, and Red Sox, I think they were like, well, I'd rather know what the penalties are before I go over, or whatever. I'd like to know what the Lux tax looks like.
Yeah, the penalties the same? Are they worse? Is the threshold going up? Is the threshold going away? What's going to happen? I think the threshold going away, that's a pipe dream. That's not happening. So I'm not going to delete that out, but I'm going to say that's probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
There were more moves though. We recorded on Wednesday, and I think on the episode we said, well, it'd be pretty hard to get a physical done between now and 11:59 Eastern or 12:01. I forget what the final cutoff was, but it's not going to work. Nothing else is going to happen. And we actually had one more big signing. Well, two, if you're Eno, we had a trade. We had some relievers on the move. We had a player come back from overseas and sign a multi-year deal.
If you're Eno, you're just going to let that slide. While you were gone, Britt, I must have mentioned Rich Hill's name about 18 times.
Oh, so this was a blockbuster move.
This is a huge move for me.
Huge.
I put Rich Hill on every team that needed a starter.
He did.
To be fair, he's a great veteran, guy to plug in.
What is $5 million again? Yeah, it's it's no big deal for a team that can afford it, and he'd probably give him 100 good innings or maybe 140.
Yeah, none of that was really the problem with the conversation. It was the Jays should add Kyle Seager, and then he's like the hitting version of Rich Hill. That was the moment we jumped the shark with the Rich Hill mentions. Yeah. But
he's not old enough to be Rich Hill anyway.
Well, I was listening to Max Scherzer talk about how the Dodgers ruined him because they tried to keep his pitch count in check down the stretch, and he thinks that lowered his work capacity, and that in turn is why he didn't have the work capacity in the playoffs to do what he did in 19.
But the numbers didn't really line up on that. The numbers didn't really line up on that.
No, but
he had one less pitch per start with the Dodgers than with the Nationals.
Yeah, the work capacity argument is also interesting because he's older. What people don't remember is 2019 was 2 years ago, so he's older than he was
I know. No, but and that's you never want to say that to a player. Oh,
not him either. He's absolutely terrifying to say that.
I've said it to some that are legitimately old, where they're near the end of their career old, and they've dropped the F-bomb back at me.
Yeah, I think my first or second day on the Nats beat in 19, Jamal Collier, who now works at ESPN, does basketball, asked Scherzer about getting older, and we were in a big scrum, 20 people or so. Scherzer just stopped, stared at him for 10 seconds. And, he's got the two different color eyes. He's terrifying.
Oh, my God.
Just stared at him and was like, next question. I was like, okay, I'm never asking that guy about his age again.
Lovely.
Never.
Yeah, that's not something they want to talk about.
So Rich Hill goes back to a familiar place. This is a Boston rotation that I think deserves an incomplete grade. They had 2 pitchers. It was Hill and Michael Wacha, who we talked about earlier this week. They have the health grade D-, health grade F probably on this rotation. I like Nathan Eovaldi. I think he's probably underrated in terms of what he does on a per inning basis.
He's had issues.
But you've got Sale, who wasn't quite himself coming back. You've got Hill. You've got Wacha. You've got James Paxton, who they added also for the future, right? Like they're
something below an F. Paxton gets it.
They're leaning into risk, but with that, if you find a way to keep pitchers healthy, or if you have enough of these guys and you can lean on depth when you're missing a couple of them, okay, that can work. It's not stable, but it can work.
I think there's some brilliance to it. It's kind of what like the Dodgers have done to an extent, and even the Giants. The IL is the option for an older player. You know what I mean? The IL is like the secret option where you can be like, oh, he's not pitching that well. Oh, his arm hurts.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
his old hurts. And let's see if we can get him right. And if we can't, he'll just be on the IL, or we'll release him eventually, or someone else will get hurt and then we'll bring him back. I think the IL is like basically a way to manipulate the roster.
Absolutely. It's why it was such a big deal like 2 years ago when they changed it from 15 days, remember? Because 15 days is 3 starts. So you really kind of had to be hurt. It was a lot harder to phantom DL guys rather than just kind of giving them a little time off. So
now it's 10. You could even miss just 1 start if you kind of time it right.
Right. So I don't think it's ever going to go back to the longer one, but it certainly has really, as soon as they did it, people were like, teams are going to mess with this. And sure enough, I think there was a record, and there's been a record every year since for IL stints.
And, it makes injury analysis hard too, because you're like, oh, people are being injured at a higher rate. And you're just like, are they though? It's kind of hard to tell. But I did talk to a veteran pitcher who said that like literally the team came to him and said, we want to put you on the IL, or we're going to release you. And he actually pitched like 2 more seasons after that. So, like it wasn't like he was super done, but like, that's a thing that happens in baseball.
Yeah. Yes.
So the big thing that happened on Wednesday, go ahead, Britt.
No, but I was going to get back to the signings and the fact that I also thought, again, stay hot, that once we got to Wednesday, that there wasn't going to be any more movement, and there was a ton.
Yeah, this one surprised me. Like Marcus Stroman to the Cubs at last minute, though there were later deals than this on Wednesday, and it was a 3-year deal for $71 million was what I saw. I couldn't believe that, because I thought with Ray and Gossman, we compared those 3 guys a lot on this show. With those guys each getting 5 years, I assumed Stroman would also get 5 years. And I also didn't expect the Cubs to spend right now, even though the Cubs can spend anytime they want. They're one of the cornerstone franchises. They've got bottomless pockets. There's no issue with spending. It's kind of a question of, well, how good do you think you're going to be, and when do you want to add players, and when do you want to just, take extra profit? Like that's the question they're asking themselves all the time. But Stroman is another play in stuff without velocity. And I don't care if he blocks me on Twitter. I don't follow a lot of players anyway. I don't spend a lot of time on Twitter. This is actually a pretty good signing, but it's interesting to me that it fits in so much with the things they've tried to do in past years, albeit while spending less money, right? Stroman, Hendricks, Adbert Alzolay, probably their big 3. They added Wade Miley previously for some depth. Alec Mills is still there. They're probably not done now. Too. It's starting to shape up to be a rotation that can at least give you the innings you need. I would say they're probably adding 1 more, likely from the bargain corner, even though that pool is starting to dry up pretty fast.
There's no Rich Hill anymore.
Yeah, well, you can't go everywhere. You can't have 30 Rich Hills. I know,
have like a body count counter, except it's like the Rich Hill comment counter.
If I had more graphic tools at my disposal, I'd have that running. Yeah.
Yeah, I think when you look at Stroman, and you look at a deal like that, I think the Cubs were more comfortable doing the like higher AAV and less years, because you look at the 5-year deals and you look at a team like the Cubs who say they're competing now, but could very easily, and we've seen this kind of pivot. Maybe Stroman pitches all 3 years here, maybe he doesn't. But I think. Right. I think when you look at what Jed Hoyer is trying to accomplish, they don't want to go through this like long, arduous rebuild. They want to compete now, but they also don't want to saddled themselves with the contracts and some of the mistakes that they made in the past. So I think this makes a lot of sense. I don't follow Marcus Stroman either, but he gets retweeted into my timeline all the time. And did he really drive to Chicago to hopped in his car as soon as it was done to get a physical?
I mean, I think that was what's behind the flurry, because I did reach out to some people on teams and be like, what's going on? Like, how are these still happening? And they were saying, I think that we didn't know about some physicals. So some people had the physicals done before we even heard about the deal. And that's probably some of the smaller deals, like some of the reliever deals, like Mark Malanson signed on Wednesday, right?
Corey Knebel, yeah.
Corey Knebel. They probably just they probably got we're doing the physical when we heard about it, like they got further along. But Stroman had to goose this and make sure that it got done before it went down. But I like that deal better than Robbie Ray and Kevin Gossman, honestly. I know that he doesn't have the strikeout rate, but he has that great ground ball rate. I think he can have more strikeouts. I think he could add more sliders and cutters and take a few sinkers out. I like his wide arsenal. I like his ground ball rate. I like his athleticism, his defense. I like the shorter deal. I like that deal better.
Yeah, there's just a lot more flexibility for the team on a 3-year deal than a 5-year deal, even if you're paying the extra AAV. Because like Britt suggested, I think you can more easily flip him if things aren't going the way you want at any point. It's an easier sell trading to other teams when you're only talking about taking on, remaining season plus.
He's more of a trade asset.
For sure. But that's still, that depth chart, they still need to make a lot of moves if they're going to put a team together that's actually competitive in that division.
It is funny. What do you think? What do you think this signals? I got a lot of questions from people being like, "Oh, yeah, this means they're going to spend, right? Like they're going to do more. They need this and this." And someone said they need more lefty power and another starter. And I was like, how about a Chris Archer, Kyle Schwarber reunion? And to me, that would be kind of the top end of what they would do going forward. I just don't see them, paying maybe Story, but I just don't see them paying for Carlos Correa. Does that make sense? Maybe.
I don't think they're a Correa team.
Correa?
They certainly could be. There's no reason why they can't be, right? If you're a Cubs fan, you're more. Well, you should shoot for the moon. You should.
But he's also righty, and they have 2 guys that could play shortstop, and they seem to, 2 young guys, and I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if I see them as a Correa team, but I think none of us saw them signing Stroman to this kind of a deal, so they could make a few other moves
team, right?
that surprise us. The NL Central isn't particularly intimidating.
But Schwarber and Archer would fit, I think, the Stroman thing, where it's Schwarber is not going to take 5 years, Yeah. Schwarber could be a 3-year deal. Archer could be a 1-year deal. They could keep that flexibility, and they could say, "Hey, we're trying to make a competitive team. You get the lefty power. You have 5, starters.
It's weird. They had a couple of lefties. Anthony Rizzo could bring him back if you wanted to. I don't know. I didn't see this coming because I just didn't think they were spending now. I thought they were going to spend a year or two from now and kind of do the big market, turn the roster over a bunch of times, and then add later. But as we've said, Stroman's not available next winter. So if you want him for 2023 and 2024, you also have to have him for 2022. So maybe that's part of the thinking here as well. I think the interesting thing about these deals, as we look at starting pitchers, Rich Hill shouldn't have been first in the rundown, but he had to be because this is the show that we put together. Is you have this choice with your 1-year pitchers between guys like Hill, who have more injury concerns or they're older and you're worried about the volume of innings, versus guys like Dylan Bundy, who ended up with the Twins on a 1-year deal, who have a massive skills problem that needs to be fixed and maybe needs to tinker with mechanics or go through some sort of major overhaul to get back to previous levels. And Bundy showed a ceiling that I didn't think he had anymore prior to his 2021 collapse. He ends up in Minnesota on a 1-year deal. In terms of team and fit, that one kind of checks out. That's the sort of deal you're like, okay, yeah, that seems like the kind of player that they would go after to address their needs. You're getting innings more likely than not, but how good are those innings going to be? Britt, you've seen a lot of Dylan Bundy over the years, and now we've seen this Jekyll and Hyde routine over the last 2 seasons. Do you think the Twins can ultimately get him back to at least being kind of a mid-rotation above average major league starter again.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me to watch the different trajectory of Kevin Gossman and Dylan Bundy, because those were the two guys that were supposed to be the hope for Baltimore to turn it around before this current rebuild. And I think with Bundy, it's still in there. Like, this was a guy who was run up the flagpole very early. You do wonder how much, like, his work conditions, like, he was throwing at crazy distances. He was doing crazy workout regimens. The Orioles were always concerned about that. You do wonder how much that and all the early injuries he had kind of just put his career on hold, because it seemed like you're just always waiting, similar to Hunter Harvey, who the Giants just picked up because the Orioles put him on waivers. You're always waiting for him to get healthy and to kind of be that guy. I do think that the Twins are well known for being a good organization, an organization that could develop and find some of these weaknesses and make them better. I think the Kevin Gossman deal, I know we talked about earlier, you're giving 9 figures to a guy in Toronto now who had struggled mightily in the American League East based off of pretty much one good year. I think that deal is much more of a gamble than people realize it is. We talked about Stroman. At least Stroman has, the durability. He always took the ball for the Mets. I think when you look at, risk reward here, I think that Kevin Gossman might have a higher ceiling at this point in his career, but Marcus Stroman to me would be a more dependable guy. And I'm surprised that Toronto decided that they were going to go all in on 5 years of Kevin Gossman. But back to Bundy, I do think he could be an interesting, like, comeback story somewhat. I do also think that this could be the end of the road if he doesn't turn it around here. You wonder, what does he just become a has-been? Another well-named bust
Transition
to kind of add
to
to
the
the pile
bullpen or something. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, it's sad because, everything is there. The talent is there. The work ethic is there. This is a guy who, like, eats, sleeps, breathes baseball. And he just hasn't been able to put it together. Though, to be fair, he just came from a place in Anaheim where the pitching was atrocious. They lost Mickey Callaway, was their pitching coach. There was a lot of transitions that were happening there. And I think that certainly didn't help. So I hope that he can find it in Minnesota. I really do.
Yeah, I think the quick question, I'll throw the follow-up in Eno's direction, is that we saw the home run rate drastically improve in the shortened season for Dylan Bundy, and that was just never good during his time in Baltimore. And obviously a significant part of that is the park. Camden yards, boosts homers, but it snapped all the way back to those Camden sort of numbers in 2021. So is that just part of the profile? Because we did see some walk rate improvement in the shortened season from Bundy as well. We've always said you can get away with one of those skills flaws. You can't be a little worse than average with walks and a lot worse than average with homers. It will come back to bite you, and it certainly did in a big way, which Bundy was also dealing with a shoulder injury in 2021 as well. So maybe that was part of why the skills went the wrong way too.
Yeah, I mean, it was some of the worst velo of his career last year, especially near the end of the season. He was struggling to crack 90 on the fastball. So I think some injury was part of it. I think that, in a short sample, the most noisy thing out there is your home run rate. It's the thing that we know the least, like it's the thing that needs the highest sample to kind of to tell us what we need to know. But then you're also seeing just some drop off in the ride on his fastball, and everything was sinking more. Which I wouldn't be surprised here checking his vertical release point. There was some movement in his vertical release point as it's come down off a peak in 2019. So I think he was a little bit hurt. I think he was dealing with something. He's had that long injury history. The velo is dropping. I would say that they hope he can get healthy. But I think in general, there's this a little bit of a struggle in front offices between innings and floor and upside. And, Britt was speaking to this a little bit when she was talking about how much of a gamble Gossman is, how much a gamble Ray is, how Stroman has the higher floor. But that goes on all the way down your rotation. And I was talking to one team official that was like, I don't really care about floor because I feel like my young guys can bring me floor. And so all I want to do is chase upside on the market. I want to buy free agents that I think represent upside. So they were much more interested in somebody like Carlos Rodon than they would be in like Tyler Anderson. When you're talking about sort of a 3 or 4 in terms of, I'd rather give Rodon like, 2 and 20, 2 and 40, 220, 2. I would rather give Rodon 2 and 40 than give Tyler Anderson 3 and 40.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I could imagine that's where you can get that surplus value. Not only do you get the performance if it works out and your team is good, but then you also have a better trade chip if it doesn't work out. Whereas if you go for floor and you're just trading innings, you're going to get something back for that player. Everyone needs innings for the most part as you move through a season. You're not getting impact prospects back.
Yeah, the Pirates didn't get much for Tyler Anderson. And then on top of that, what we were talking about just earlier about the IL being like the option for an older player, right? Like with Rodon, he's either good or he's hurt, right? So that's kind of easy to deal with because the IL is unlimited, right? But with Tyler Anderson, he might just be okay. And then your young guys, you're like, wow, Colby Allard really took a step forward this year. What do I do with Tyler Anderson now?
Yeah.
Do I just release him like 1 year into this 3-year deal? Or I can't, like in the bullpen, he's not going to be that much value to me. And it would be kind of weird to just put him on the IL when he's kind of been, healthy.
Yeah. That's true. Those are good points. Did you guys see? So we talked about how fast all these deals came together. Justin Verlander is still not done. So now he's in limbo, even though that was agreed upon pretty early. I want to say, weeks ago?
Wow.
2 weeks ago?
This is the team that like didn't draft Brady Aiken, right? So I bet you they're disputing something in his physical.
Yeah. Interesting.
So that
there were a couple moves on
pause.
hold. Yeah. There's a couple moves on hold, right? Didn't the Orioles sign a reliever and he didn't get Lyles and he didn't get his physical? And then I think there's one more that like was placed on hold. Of course, the most obvious one where the player, the physical condition, Freddie Freeman, didn't seem to really get any traction, which kind of surprised me, right? It was kind of an easy hanging out thing out there for the Braves to just go get him. He lives in Atlanta. They know what his physical is going to be.
I wouldn't say that he's in the Hall of Fame now, but I think he's on a Hall of Fame track. And, he would go in as a Brave, but there's a chance that if he goes to the Hall of Fame, he signs somewhere else for the next 6 years. He might go on with someone else's hat, which I don't know. That's not everything, but that's something. It's nice to have more Braves in the Hall of Fame. And then on top of that, the ass sounds like 6'180". That's not. You'd probably rather have like 5 and 150 or something and try to keep it, not pay that last year, but. When you have Acuna and Albies on these like really small deals, like it might be okay to have one guy who's a little bit overpaid near the end of his career,
Yeah. Also, when you have a guy who won a World Series for you, fans are never going to be like, "Oh, why did we sign Freddie Freeman?" You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, he's built up that goodwill.
Even if he's like Albert Pujols at the end, right? They'll be like, he still gave us that ring.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if you signed him from some other organization and then he was that player at the end of his career, there'd be a lot more resentment there.
Yeah, like Freddie Freeman in year 6 on the Cardinals or on the Dodgers, and he hasn't done anything for the Dodgers. Everyone's yelling at him.
Yeah.
And Freeman, and we say this a lot, he should age about as gracefully as any hitter, right? He doesn't strike out a lot. He doesn't reach. He walks a ton, still has good power, but he is 32. Like, that's 6 years on a 32-year-old, a long time.
It's not Pujols.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of if it's a 6-year deal now, it's not giving Pujols all that money in all those years.
Also, when he came in, Chipper Jones and all those guys were there. Like, there is value to having a Freddie Freeman, even if he's not producing in the final years of his contract.
Yeah.
Yeah, they definitely
can be. How much do you think proximity to home matters to a player at this stage of his career, right? Because this is last big contract time for Freddie Freeman, right? And I think
but how do you define home? I mean, he lives in Atlanta, but he also grew up in LA. He grew up in Orange County.
That's why people keep throwing the Dodgers out there as the other team that would go out and get Freddie Freeman. That just doesn't seem like the way Andrew Friedman in that front office would go. Like giving 6 years to a 32-year-old anything. I just don't think that seems like that goes against them. But home matters, like for sure. But I don't know. Like with Trevor Story, there was this idea, it's the Rangers or the Astros because he's a He's a Dallas kid. He grew up, I think, in Irving, Texas.
Oh, the funniest was Chris Bryant to
geez, yeah, Colorado because it's
to the Rockies because he's from Las Vegas.
And someone I think tweeted that New York and Chicago are closer than Vegas and Denver.
I think covering guys, in clubhouses, I think is a tiebreaker if everything else is equal. Like Scherzer, for example, mentioned how it's nice that the West Coast would have been tough on his family because they live in Jupiter. The Mets have a spring training home in Florida, so now he'll be able to see his kids more. Now that's important, I think. I think that's legit. But I think if the Dodgers or a West Coast team had blown away the Mets in an offer, that would not have been
45 or 50, that
wouldn't have been a hindrance, right? I think it is a tiebreaker when everything else is equal and you start to get into these little things. But at the end of the day, it's about who offers you the most money.
And mostly a big part of it is because when you're done, a lot of times you're done at 40. That's a very early retirement, and you can be involved with your kids in a big part after that. So Buster Posey comes to mind where, he's retired now. And yes, someone asked him in his retirement thing, are you going to move back to Georgia? Like your whole family's in Georgia? And he's like, yeah, probably, probably soon. Not right away. We've been in San Francisco for so long, we'll probably, still have a base out here, but at some point we're probably going to move back. And he's now like 38 and has twins, and they're like newborn, so it's like, he's fine. Like he's going to do the parenting after the career,
Yeah, I think there are a lot of other factors that play into it. Does the player have a spouse? Does the player and spouse, do they have a family? Like that's huge. Where is the other side of the family located? Like where the player grew up is only half of the equation if there's a family structure in place.
That's right.
The other person in the relationship maybe didn't grow up in the same
and
place.
How rich did they get? Did they get so rich they just moved the whole family in with that, into houses around them? Then they're like, hey, we all live in California now. It's fine. I bought them all houses.
But people love to speculate though, based on where these guys are from, where they're going to go. And I just think it's such a minute, again, it's a tiebreaker. It's such a minute thing. These guys are making enough money to have nannies and have help. Their wives usually don't work. It's just a different scenario than the rest of us would think about weighing for jobs. And even then, if we were making this kind of money.
Yeah. What were you saying? They're making that kind of, they're making that kind of money. I want to be close to, family because I don't make that kind of money and they want them around to take care of my kids so I can go out to eat. But these people have people on staff.
Yeah.
I think that the two things I've talked a little bit to players about this, but I'm also just trying to be I'm trying to put myself in their heads. I think the two things that would matter with this, the deal. And I think the second place thing would be how good is the team?
Yeah.
I think people care. I have talked to one that is approaching free agency who's like, yeah, I care. I would rather be on a good team.
It's probably a little more fun. Probably gives your work a little more meaning to play for a good team than to play for a team that's a consistent bottom feeder.
Yeah. Then the other thing is how much is money. There's some balance there. I think number one is money. Very, very, very. But I think there's 1A would be how good is the team.
Well, the reason for 1A though is if you join the Dodgers, you're almost guaranteed a playoff share every year.
No, so that's more money.
That's a significant bump too. So it always kind of factors back. It always kind of factors back to money, right? You're on a good team. It's a lot easier to have multiple all-stars on a good team. A lot of most guys have
all-stars is money too.
All-star bonuses. So that all factors in. Winning pays. So yeah, I believe that too.
Let's talk about some relievers that have been on the move recently. Mark Malanson to Arizona. As I tweeted, you could have given me 24 guesses as to which team would sign Mark Malanson, and they would not have been in my top 24. It's a 2-year deal for Malanson. It could be a trade him this summer sort of thing. Good news from a fantasy perspective, they don't have anyone pushing him for saves, and it's hard to find people with individual holds on closer roles. I would say Mark Malanson has that in Arizona, so we're excited from that perspective. Arizona is one of those teams. We didn't talk a lot about them this season because it was a disaster year for them on so many levels. It wasn't supposed to be, right? It looked like they could have been a mid-pack NL West team that maybe they would have finished 500 if things went well for them this year. That was sort of the rosy outlook for them. Instead, they had that dreadful stretch that I can't remember how bad it was, but it was truly awful that just sank their entire season. They dealt with injuries. They had underperformers. and they're not interesting on paper when you look at this roster right now. Like, they have more work to do. Signing a reliever first is just straight up weird. They do have some young talent getting closer, but they need a bridge to that young talent. They're still a couple years away from most of that prospect core being truly ready to take over. And plus, they're in a division with the Dodgers, the Giants, and the Padres, all trying to win right now. So they're kind of facing that uphill battle as well. Is there any logical other move that you see with Arizona? Because Malanson wasn't logical at all. And I feel like if you're doing that, you're probably doing something else somewhere on this roster.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, Arizona just kind of gets the shaft because they're not so bad like the Orioles, where we talk about, oh my God, they're so bad, they're going nowhere, right? But they also haven't been interesting or really relevant in a while. And I was shocked. I'm still shocked. I still would love to know like what the Malanson thing was about. Where they're like, you know what? We need to make sure we have this reliever on lockdown for the late innings. Like, what? Is that a priority for the team? I'm still like totally flummoxed by this move and by the logic and the reasoning. Is Arizona gonna turn the tables? Are they gonna all of a sudden try to go for it? Because otherwise, why do you do that? Do you do that because you don't want to lose games late in the game? Because that's a bad way to lose, because you're now bringing up maybe some young players and you don't want that gut punch. I'm actually just throwing ideas out there because I still can't fathom the reasoning behind it, you know?
I mean, projections have them as a bottom 5 team, right? And
Yes.
it's kind of hard. I don't really see what am I. If you argue against that, you have to argue that Varsho breaks out.
The list is already. Ketel Marte stays and bounces back to 2019
it has a
levels.
fully healthy 2019 type year. Rojas takes a step forward. Gallen recovers.
Yeah, full season as an ace. Bumgarner's like a,
and Kelly are good 2-3s, or maybe Luke Weaver turns into a 2.
It's a lot of wish casting, to be fair.
And then looking on the free agent market, I'm just assuming they're not like a Correa team. I would look for like younger guys on the free agent market that maybe had some upside, and so that would be like a Clint Frazier type, right?
Gone.
And then if you're looking for anybody under 30 that it could turn into something like Albert Almora, what are we even talking about here? Like, who?
That should be the title of this segment. What are we even talking about here?
Yeah, but or they go the old but cheap and try to do like Kyle Seager at third and make Rojas a floating guy, and then their infield is Seager, Ahmed, Marte, Walker. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe they just think that that something that Malanson is very. Yeah, I think he's proven that he's very solid and capable, and so maybe they think that he becomes a trade asset.
Is this like an agent favor? Those happen sometimes. I'm not sure. I can't explain it.
Trying to set up a future deal with someone else by doing this now. I guess that's a possibility. But yeah, one playoff appearance in the last 10 seasons for Arizona. It doesn't look like that's going to change in 2022. Just didn't make any sense at all. Corey Knebel to Philly made a lot of sense because the Phillies have had some ongoing bullpen issues, and Knebel, when he's healthy, is very good. Corey Knebel, I think, can be a top 10 reliever with health. I think he's shown that sort of ceiling before. So I like this fit in terms of skills and team, and it's a 1-year, $10 million deal. So it's not, it's not 3 for $40. It's not the longer term deal that other relievers that have this sort of ceiling can get, probably because of recent injury issues. But I mean, Knebel bounced back in a big way with the Dodgers in 2021. 30 Ks against 9 walks and 25 2/3 innings, ERA in the mid 2s, whip under 1. Is there anything I'm missing, or is this actually a possible top 10 closer landing in Philadelphia?
I got him as a top 10 stuff guy in terms of free agent relievers. One thing that you like to see sometimes, is for him to have people that can actually hand games to him. You couldn't be a top 10 closer on some of those past Phillies teams, even if he was a good closer, because they would blow the save before they even got to him, But now I'd say with Alvarado, Brogdon, and Coonrod, they've got a lot of velo, at least in that pen, even Sir Anthony Dominguez. So like, they don't have great command in that bullpen, but they've got a lot of velocity. So I think that they might actually have done the work of turning this bullpen around, which was a Sisyphean task.
Yeah, well, I still think they need like probably 2 more late inning relievers, though.
Really? 2 more?
Yeah.
2 more?
Yeah. Yes.
They've been trying. They got Ryan Stern.
I think it's at least one to go into the season, and then maybe one more at the deadline, depending on how that group that Eno described, like how well they stay healthy and how much command possibly improves with that group. I would, to be a legit like deep playoff team, yeah, I think 2. But I think, are they going to spend up on 2? That doesn't seem likely.
I don't know. I mean, to me, in a perfect world, Knebel is the setup guy, right? You get someone better than him, and now your bullpen is pretty good, right? Now you can kind of find a way to navigate through the first 2/3 of the game. You feel pretty good about how it's going after. But, I mean, keep in mind, as you guys know, there's always somebody hurt, it feels like, in the bullpens. You never have too many relievers. I know they need some other help elsewhere, right? They need some outfield help, probably a pitcher, but a starting pitcher. But I think when you look at how to make this Phillies team good, and you look at, okay, how are they going to compete against the Braves and the Mets in the NL East? And I think you have to think about getting 2 more good arms. Otherwise, what are you doing? Are you just going to keep wasting NL MVP seasons from Bryce Harper?
Well, my only problem is that at this point, I think the bullpen looks like in better shape than their outfield, other than Harper. They've got right now at the top of their depth charts Matt Moniak and Adam Hazley, and I don't even know if Hazley is wasn't he like, he came back from that? Didn't he like leave the team?
Yeah, he was away for a little while. Matt Vierling also in the mix. They have to add an outfielder, probably 2, a starter and like a 4th outfielder that they can trust to play a lot more. Because I don't
see
think
Schwarber and then like just pushing all the young guys to center and being like between Moniak, Hazley, maybe Kingery, maybe Vierling, like we'll just put the young guys in center and we'll go Schwarber, Harper on the corners.
They could buy 1 more reliever. I don't know, what do they have in their system? Do you guys? Do they have someone outfield? Do they have someone who can graduate to any of these?
I think Vierling is the guy that they can maybe hope. He's 25. I don't think he really wants to play. They want him in center, but that would be the awkwardness about like getting Schwarber, is that the Vierling wouldn't be that great in center, and so you'd be making him a 4th outfielder. But Vierling was really good when he debuted, although he didn't have great barrel rates. So I don't know. Might have all been batted ball luck.
So I've got a couple thoughts here with the Phillies. If you're going to add another impact reliever, it's probably via trade. I think I've seen the Phillies linked to the Josh Hader rumors over the years. I've seen them linked more recently to Craig Kimbrell. I think in either of those circumstances, the Britt scenario plays out where Knebel's the second best option, and you've got Alvarado as a great 3. That's a really nice trio at the back. If it ends up being Alvarado, Knebel, and I think Kimbrell's a lot more likely based on the White Sox desire to move him and what it's going to take prospect-wise, what the Phillies have. So
that's $16 million.
It's another big lift that way, which means they're probably going cheaper than to fill the outfield problem. And then I think the other question, though, that I have, the first thing I said was just speculation, so just cast that aside. Just seems like a thing that could happen that way. How much do you trust the rotation? Wheeler, Nola, great 1-2. Ranger Suarez, I think, is a pretty polarizing player from a fantasy perspective for me because we didn't see it for very long. He was fantastic in every role he was asked to hold. When you start drilling into the underlying numbers, I don't come away with an expectation that he's somehow like this breakout guy that's going to keep a low 3s ERA and a great whip and a strikeout per inning over a full season as a starter. I don't see that coming from him. Maybe other people do. Like I think they need like even more than they need extra relievers. Like great. If you go get Kimbrell, it makes you better. If they could find 1 more starter and just leave the bullpen as is, I think that's a more impactful move if they can't do both.
Yeah. I think I've always said that they feel a little bit stuck because, if they did add Kimbrell, they'd be at, $200 million or really close. And so then it would just be, hey, the rest of you figure it out. And that would be a little bit weird in that outfield. So, but I guess I see enough in the bullpen where I'd say, hey, go spend that money somewhere else. But yeah, and then coming up, there's some guys like Bryson Stott as a shortstop that's kind of fun. 24, left-handed, kind of killed it in the Arizona Fall League. He could be close. Did some time in AAA last year, but I think that's just what do we do after Didi Gregorius, because Didi Gregorius is pretty old to be a shortstop.
Right.
Could you make Didi like a utility guy around the infield and just play?
Oh, sure. I think you'd be happy
more
if Stott was ready. Yeah, but I mean, then you could try Stott in center, but I think that would be not taking the most advantage of his capabilities, and then you'd still have to need a shortstop after Didi, right? So, maybe Moniak can handle it. He has an interesting, kind of a wild story where he was he's a 1-1 guy. He's the first pick overall in the draft, and then seemed like he was a total bust in the minor leagues, to be frank, and now has had a couple years in the minor leagues where he's looked a little better, but still projects to be below average, kind of near replacement. So, but then if you look at that's where center field trade might, if I was going to use trade assets, I think I might use it in center field, unless I'd heard something from Adam Hazley that's like he's coming back and he can be our guy. The free agency is a really bad place to look for a center fielder. I mean, you don't want to sign 38-year-old Brett Gardner. Kevin Pillar is not really a center fielder anymore. And then the next best center fielder is Odubel Herrera.
Could they? I mean, they could go out and maybe make a deal for Kevin Kiermeier and find a way to send some money back, or balance it out that way, and just play the defensive route. That could certainly
Cedric
happen.
Mullins.
Ooh,
Cedric
the blockbuster.
Mullins.
I mean, that's what everybody wants, but it's kind of, I think that's, we keep circling that name, but I can't imagine the Orioles trading him away, but maybe they will.
Yeah. No, because he's just
other stuff.
Yeah. I mean, do I think he's going to be part of the next great Orioles team? No, but it's just not good optics because he's still cheap. He's still youngish.
Yeah.
They're going to have Rushman probably come up next year.
They've got to pretend they're building towards something. I mean, it's like year 3 of the rebuild or something.
Okay, I think it's year 4.
That's bad, dude. This is supposed to be when it's coming together, like, hey, we got Rutschman, we got Mullins, we got something.
It is year 4. I left in 18, and that was like when they were forced to rebuild. And so
I don't
19,
think they'll
20,
trade
21.
Mullins.
This is year 4. So like somebody, and I didn't get to talk to Michael Elias at the GM meetings, but I'd be curious to know, like, is this the year? This has to be the year you show some win-loss improvement. They did sign Rougned Odor. Not gonna light up anything, but
you start like rolling up those good starters like DL Hall and Grayson Rodriguez. I think they need to see the major leagues this year.
It's such a tough task. It's a big leap already, but then to pitch in such a hitter-friendly park like Camden Yards. I mean, you want to be optimistic, but I think Orioles fans have seen this movie before. This was supposed to be DL Hall, Grayson Rodriguez. This was Kevin Gossman and Dylan Bundy. Before that, this was Chris Tillman, Brian Mattis, Jake Arrieta.
Oh,
that's going way back. It's like the 09 prospect
I'm old,
handbook.
guys. When I took the beat over in 10, that's all you kept hearing about was how these guys were like up and coming, and these young birds were going to get it done with Matt Wieters behind the plate, and it never really panned out. So I hope it's different, but it's just such a tall task. I don't know. We'll see.
I could play optimist for a moment, not for any reason other than to be like a devil's advocate, but you could probably talk yourself into where the Orioles are at in their rebuild right now and look at the 2021 Tigers and say, hey, you might be a more watchable young team this year because of Rutschman, because of those young pitchers. You're going to struggle. You're not going to win a lot of games. The division is tough. All the things that make playing in Baltimore difficult are still there. But then, fast forward to this time next year, maybe you are finally in that window where you're going to start adding the pieces that you need to be more competitive, to possibly make a run. I think the key difference is the AL East is not aging like the AL Central. It's not going to be as quick of a path to possibly contend for the division title, but at least there could be some light at the end of the tunnel if you bring those guys up and they end up just staying healthy. I mean, like, health is a big part of why a lot of those pitching prospect groups of the past, not even just in Baltimore. I think around that same time, the Royals had one, and it was Danny Duffy, I think, originally, and it was like John Lamb and a bunch of guys like that, and it wasn't even close to working out. Injuries were a huge part of that, and I think that's something that you just need to keep those arms as healthy as they possibly can be. There was a surprising trade, though. This is why I was thinking about trading Kevin Kiermeier to the Phillies, and the Brewers ended up making a deal with the Red Sox just minutes before the faucet was turned off. Jackie Badley Jr. goes back to Boston. I didn't think he was going anywhere. I just thought there was not really a clear and obvious path to move him somewhere else. But he goes back to a place where he, of course, had a lot more success in the past, where the Red Sox needed a great defensive center fielder, and maybe they can just get him back to his pre-2021 levels at the plate. Hunter Renfro goes to Milwaukee as part of the deal. That kind of balances out some of the money. But the other key that balanced out the rest of the money, 2 prospects went to Boston as part of this deal. So basically to unload.
Salary dump.
It was a salary dump by the Brewers where they gave up prospects to get kind of an Avisail Garcia replacement. Like Hunter Renfro, Avi Garcia, very similar players. The difference, of course, Hunter Renfro in arbitration, you're going year to year with him. Avi Garcia just got 4 years from the Marlins. So if you look at it that way, you could say, okay, the Brewers got back to where they were offensively. They moved JBJ, but it cost them 2 prospects. One actually grew up pretty close to Miller Park, just one of the suburbs nearby. Alex Binelas, kind of an interesting power hitting first base corner prospect.
Oh,
so I don't know. Like I'm kind of curious to see how that plays out.
I figured it out.
Yeah. Well, for the Red Sox, though, you're selling really high on Renfro. So from their point of view,
and you get
pretty good deal.
Yeah, you get
2 prospects, and you get that
money.
Guy who's really well liked in Jackie Badley Jr., really popular guy in the clubhouse and also just in the city of Boston. He's playing. He's going to give you elite defense. And David Stearns talked about this a little bit last month, how they felt like they never really got to see what Jackie Badley Jr. could do in Milwaukee. They never really tapped into that. And he talked a little bit about, like, was it the change of teams? Was it the adjustments? Like they just weren't able to, at least publicly, he didn't pinpoint like a specific reason. He was just not the guy that I think they felt that they were going to get in Milwaukee. So, I mean, these are the moves that Brewers have to make. They have to constantly think about how can we save $10 million and keep this financial flexibility. And we're going to get into that when we talk about the CBA for months and months, whether that's a real thing or a self-imposed budget from up above. But, I think from the Red Sox point of view, this is a good move. And for the Brewers, like, you weren't getting the JBJ that you thought you were getting. So it was a surprising trade, mostly because I thought all the moves were done. So who am I kidding? I've been surprised for the last week, guys. I mean, I literally thought we were all going to be taking early November vacations while we waited for the CBA stuff to go on. And I did take a vacation and missed some of this stuff. So I have the pulp. There is like insiders, and then there's like people way inside. And clearly I'm neither.
But I think I figured it out. I was like, why are the Brewers salary dumping? They didn't sign someone, like what is it? And check this out. 2 names for you. Kristen Yelich and Josh Hader. In 2021, Yelich was paid $14 million. In this coming season, he's due $26 million.
It's first year of the extension, right? I think that's the difference. Like signed a while ago, but
Hader is an ARB 3, and he just went from $6 million to $10 million in the projections. And Woodruff goes from $3 million to the projection
double that,
for him
right?
Is Woodruff $7 million.
Yeah.
So those 3 players, the estimated payroll right now for the Brewers is $121 million on roster resource, and they've been around $100 million for like 3 straight years. So are they going to cut further?
I think they could in the right deal. That's where the Hader trade, it's more
that's where Hader starts to make sense
now than it was a year ago, because he's more expensive now. He's a year older, right? Yeah. He's a year closer to possibly beginning his decline. Like all of those things are true.
Cousins and Williams, and you're like, well, we have these 2 elite relievers. One of them can be the closer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you trade Hader for, what do you trade Hader for? You trade Hader for 1 reliever that you plug right into the bullpen, right?
Or some kind of bat, right? They still need some offense.
No, I think the centerpiece would be a bat because they're always looking for more
a
bats.
really good impact bat.
Yeah.
You would trade him for a center fielder. You would trade him for a center fielder and a reliever you can plug in right away.
I'm trying to think of a three-way trade that gets Cedric Mullins to Milwaukee and gets Josh Hader to some other evil empire.
Well, see, the Angels bought their bullpen. The Astros don't have extra center. I mean, it doesn't have to be a center fielder. They could just take a bat. That makes it a lot easier to figure out. But who would trade for Hader?
Well, a lot of teams. What about the Phillies? We just talked about the Phillies needed.
Yeah, the Phillies could do it. The Mets.
I mean, Alec Boehm plus other stuff of some kind is probably where that conversation goes with the Phillies. Is that enough for Hader?
That's not bad. Would you make Urias a utility guy?
Probably. Or you play Boehm a lot of first base.
Center. Try someone in center. Yeah, try Boehm at first. By the way, guys, I think we did enough to not have to do not have to do the CBA this one. But I do want to throw out there that I'm working on a piece that's looking at this, and I talked to a player that was impassioned about this. That the NLDH is a raw deal for players. It's not actually a good deal. It's not something they should give up anything for. And so if he gets his way, and I'm looking at the numbers, and I think I agree with him that it's not a good deal. You're not adding a new roster spot. You're probably adding 3 or 4 jobs out there on the market at tops, because most teams just cycle through guys through their DH. So I'm actually beginning to think there won't be an NLDH. Because I don't think the players should get anything up for that.
Maybe they won't, but would they? If it doesn't come down to a bartering chip, if it's just decided, well, this is just more of like a rules thing, and rule stuff's going to be handled separately, do the players oppose it? Like,
no. If they throw it in the rule stuff, the players will take it. Yeah.
So I think that's good in reading some stuff about.
But just CBA in terms of like the CBA, but they put the rule stuff away.
Right. Yeah. That's what the Jason Stark piece that was on The Athletic today. It pointed out all these experiments that have been done at all these different levels. They're a moot point as it pertains to the CBA negotiation, because this is all about service time and money.
Neither side wants to give up money for that.
No. This is
right now they're talking about money.
This fight is about money, and it's going to be ugly because fights about money are always ugly, right? This is why it's gonna go on for 2+ months. We're probably looking at a full December and January, just like we had at the end of this week.
But we'll have a pod next week about the CBA and about the money in it, because I'm trying to do the research into terms of like what each of these things they're talking about is worth. And I think once that research is out there, we can talk about it in terms of, okay, these are the millions of dollars that need to go here, and they need to go here, and this is what they need to give up, and this is the impasse right here. This is worth this, and maybe the owners think it's worth more or less, because that's what they're arguing about.
Of course, it's always what they're arguing about. It just. It never changes. The core issue is always money. It just disguises itself in different rules and different things that they agree on. So you guys are right, though. We did, I would say, a 90% CBA free episode, which is probably going to be impossible now moving forward. So enjoy it, everybody.
Revel in it. Like coaching changes.
Play it again.
We're allowed to do coaching changes, right? Coaching changes are allowed, right?
We could talk about.
Let's cover the crap out of coaching changes.
You will learn so much about the Oakland A's candidates for the next manager. You will wish. Yeah,
let's have a whole episode about that.
I love we have 3 years of lamenting manager of the year as an award, and talking about how stupid it is, and now we have to talk about the impact of managers and those hires to get us through these next 2 months. I mean,
it's been awful watching MLB Network today. They were just like, we don't know what we're gonna do. We can't show any current players.
Why are you even watching that?
Because it's just like the default channel when I turn on the TV. And they were literally showing like games, like just random at bats from the 80s. And they were like, and then they were like, hey, like what do you think is gonna happen here? A homer or a double? Or
wow. I mean, that's kind
Harold
of fun.
Reynolds is like minutes. Harold Reynolds is sitting there going like, I don't think I was in the big leagues for this game. I don't remember this game. That's our life.
What's unfortunate is like a network that already is not super watched, like MLB Network. When I was at MLB.com, they used to tell us that MLB.com got better traffic. And so a network that's already struggling to get any kind of viewership, this is only going to make it worse. And I think we'll delve into that in weeks to come. But a sport that suffered so badly the last time there was a really long lockout was strike, obviously, 94, 95. This isn't going to help anything. Not being able to talk about the sport, not having anything else to talk about. It's just really unfortunate. It
is bad. I was looking at World Series ratings because of an argument I was having with a friend. And the World Series like used to do really well in the 70s. And I think that doesn't even count because that's just a different world because you had 3 friggin' channels.
Before cable.
Yeah, they had like one channel had the World Series on, the other one had like the night news on. You're like, okay, I'd rather watch the World Series.
You had to make sparks to dial a phone back then.
Yeah, but in the modern era, the biggest downturn in viewership was 1995. And we have actually never recovered our World Series ratings to where it was in the early 90s. And that's a little bit complicated because there was also kind of the steroid era explosion, right? And like we had like some really compelling sort of single storylines that were happening in the early 90s. But like you look at it and it's like after 94, we never got back to the same World Series ratings.
Yeah, it's I don't think I'll make this prediction. This is my one CBA contribution for the episode. I don't think this lingers into March. And I think the main reason for that, I think the players, as much as I want them to get every single thing they deserve, and they deserve a lot, and the minimum pay for every player, major league players and minor league players, should be the biggest issue of all from just a pure economic standpoint. I think because of the players losing large portions of salary in 2020, they can't afford to not get paid this year. They just can't. Like that, it would have been difficult for a lot of players to like hold the line anyway. But I just think the added pressure of that is part of what's going to, like, once again, push things ultimately more in the favor of owners. Even if the players move the ball a little bit, right? If they get more than they had, if they do better than they've done in the last CBA, which I think they will, I don't think they're going to get everything they want because that seems almost impossible for them.
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts on that. One is I've heard from a couple of places that union's been saving up their licensing money. So
yes,
there's some possibility that the union could help anybody who like is like the minimum salary guys that are struggling to kind of make it over.
Like the idea of that. Wonder how long that actually could last.
And then the other thing I'd like to say is I don't think the owners are actually as unified as people would like to make it seem, because if you think about like a Cohen right now, do you think he wants there to be a season very badly? So I think that the fractures occur on both sides, and this is what we can talk about when we do a big show. But I think the fractures occur on both sides between the rich and the poor, and it might actually be easier to keep the rich and poor players together if you do have some sort of savings as a union than it will be to keep the rich and poor owners apart, because the things that separate the rich and poor owners are the fractures in the sport.
Yeah,
the rich and poor. The poor owners always feel like they got to rein the rich owners in and have more revenue sharing and do this and do that and like make the game more favorable for them because they can't win without all that money. And so I think that could be the big fracture that the players union could actually kind of swim between.
I have one comment before we go, and that is there is a war chest. Max Scherzer talked about it in great detail a few days ago, that they've been saving for. He said that they could go for a while with what they've saved up for players. So I don't think it's going to come down to like guys not or making the minimum, not able to cover their finances. He said hopefully they don't tap into it, but they've been saving this up for years. They've known since the last CBA ended in 16, or since the last CBA was negotiated in 16, that this was going to be a bad fight. So they've been saving.
Yeah,
glad to hear it because I don't know.
Well, not super glad to hear it because
no, I don't really want them to just hold out till August because they can.
Yeah, right.
I understand that impact directly on the three of us is very bad. But in the grand scheme of things, look,
it makes it a fairer fight. It makes it a fairer fight too, because of course the owners could hold out longer because they have more money.
We all work. People listening to this podcast mostly work. Like, you want to be compensated fairly for the work that you do. Like, okay, so if it takes longer than I think it's going to take because the players planned really well and have a way of keeping their finances afloat into the season, then good for them for planning. Get everything you deserve. That's what I hope happens. If it costs me something as a person who latches onto this game to make a living, well, hey,
and despite the fact that there was a ton of big signings, there is a problem. The players' share of the overall pie is lower than it's ever been. And in baseball versus the other sports, there's more dependence on minimum salary players than in any other sport. And the minimum salary players in the NBA are at 3%. We're at like 55%. I kid you not. And 55% of the league is making the minimum, and it hasn't changed much as league revenue has kind of grown through the roof. So that is a problem. When you're using half the league is on minimum salary, and the minimum salary hasn't changed really in 10 years, that's a big problem.
Yeah, let's wrap it because we're becoming a CBA pod.
That's right. Yep. Save it.
That's enough. We should have a 5-minute limit on CBA talk on every episode during whatever.
Well, then there'll be some 5-minute episodes.
We'll do some other random stuff, but get a subscription to The Athletic, 33% off the first year at theathletic.com/ratesandbarrels. All of the stories, all of the coverage of the back and forth and the slinging of the mud. It is covered in great detail. So be sure to check that out on Twitter. You can find Britt at Britt_Giroli. You can find Eno at Eno Saris. You can find me at Derek Van Riper. If you're watching us on YouTube and you're still listening at this very end point of the show, thanks for making it this far. Be sure to barrel up on the like button for this video. We'd greatly appreciate that. That is going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We are back with you on Monday.
Thanks for listening.